This 4-year-old beggar girl gets her crutch kicked by a man, but a millionaire saw everything, and when he turns the corner, something happens. Comment. What you think will happen, your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The morning sun beat down on the uneven stones of Main Street in Harmony Creek, Ohio, as the dry sound of a wooden crutch against the pavement echoed among the voices of shopkeepers setting up their stalls for another day's work. Lily, just 6 years old, limped with difficulty along the busy sidewalk, her faded clothes contrasting with the determination that shone in her brown eyes. The makeshift crutch, made from a piece of wood and tied with old rags, was too heavy for her thin arms, but she held it firmly. In her free hand, she shook a small, empty coffee can, where a few coins made a discreet clatter with each step. Her right leg, visibly weaker than her left, barely touched the ground as she moved slowly among the hurried passers-by. "Please, mister," she whispered, approaching a man in a suit who was walking briskly. "A dime for my grandma's medicine?" The man didn't even look at her, quickly turning away as if she were invisible. Lily wasn't discouraged. She had learned from a very young age that most people preferred to pretend she didn't exist, but someone with a more generous heart always appeared. A few yards ahead, she spotted Walter Thompson, a local merchant known to everyone in the area. At 45, he ran an appliance store downtown and had a reputation for being successful, although few liked his abrasive personality. His always well-pressed clothes and shiny shoes contrasted with the constant irritation he carried on his face. Lily took a deep breath and approached him as he stopped in front of a fruit stand to examine the goods. "Mr. Thompson," she said, in a sweet but firm voice, "could you help me with a dime? It's to buy medicine for Grandma Betty. She's very sick." Walter turned abruptly, his face contorting into an expression of annoyance. "How many times have I told you not to bother me? Girl, it's the same sob story every day." "But Mr. Thompson, I don't want to hear anything," he shouted, drawing the attention of several people around him. "You and that lazy grandma of yours need to stop bothering the hard-working people of this town." Silence fell. Over the market, several merchants and shoppers stopped their activities to watch the scene. Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she remained firm, holding her can with the few coins. "Grandma Betty isn't lazy," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "She raised me alone and works hard, even when she's sick." The girl's response further enraged Walter. Without thinking twice, he raised his foot and delivered a well-aimed kick to Lily's crutch. The piece of wood flew away, and the girl immediately lost her balance, falling heavily on the uneven stones of the sidewalk. The sound of the coins scattering across the ground mingled with Lily's cry of pain. Some people around exclaimed in shock, but no one moved to help her. The girl tried to get up, but her injured leg couldn't support her without the support of the crutch. "Learned your lesson?" asked Walter, adjusting his tie as if nothing had happened. "Next time, think twice before bothering people." Across the street, near the entrance to a fabric store, Richard Sterling watched the whole scene with a heavy heart. At 52, the businessman was respected throughout Harmony Creek. Owner of 3 textile mills in the region, he had built his reputation, based on hard work and honesty, but at that moment, something inside his chest broke as he saw the child on the ground. Richard dropped the papers he was carrying and ran across the street, pushing people out of the way. His mind was confused, mixed with memories he preferred to keep buried. When he finally reached the spot where Lily had fallen, he found only the coins scattered on the ground and the broken crutch. The girl had disappeared among the market stalls, probably dragging herself away from the public humiliation. Richard collected the coins one by one, his hands trembling without him understanding exactly why. "Did anyone see where the girl went?" he asked the merchants around. But they all looked away, embarrassed by having witnessed the violence without intervening. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. The image of Lily falling on the ground repeated itself in his mind like a movie he couldn't turn off, bringing with it other memories that he had been fighting to forget for years. In the days following the incident on Main Street, Richard Sterling couldn't concentrate on anything. Sitting in his office at the main mill, he looked out the window without really seeing the movement of the machines and employees below. Business meetings seemed endless, and the financial reports that used to hold his attention for hours were now just blurred numbers in his mind. Mr. Sterling. The voice of Martha, his trusted secretary for over 10 years, brought him back to reality. "Are you okay? I've called you 3 times." He blinked a few times, trying to focus on the present. "Sorry, Martha. I was thinking about some things." "The representatives from the cotton company have been waiting in the conference room for 15 minutes, she said, worried. She'd never seen her boss so distracted. "Tell them I need to reschedule. Something urgent has come up." Martha frowned but nodded. Richard grabbed his car keys and left the office without further explanation. For the 3rd time that week, he drove to downtown Harmony Creek, traveling the same streets where he had last seen Lily. The market was bustling with activity under the hot afternoon sun. Richard walked slowly among the stalls, observing each child who passed, hoping to recognize those determined brown eyes and the makeshift crutch. He asked several merchants about a little girl who was begging, but the answers were always vague or negative. "Kid asking for change? There are several around here, mister," said a lady selling vegetables, "but I don't pay attention to those things. I have to take care of my own life." Frustrated, Richard continued his search. He visited the neighborhoods further from downtown, where the houses were smaller and the dirt roads mixed with cracked asphalt. He asked in local grocery stores, small pharmacies, anywhere a sick child might try to buy medicine. It was at a pharmacy in the South Side neighborhood that he finally got a concrete clue. "The girl with the crutch?" asked the pharmacist, a grey-haired man with thick glasses. "Ah, yes, I know her. Lily. She comes here sometimes to try to buy medicine for her grandma. Polite girl, poor thing. She lives in the outskirts of town near the old reservoir." Richard's heart quickened. "Do you know where exactly?" "Look, it's kind of hard to explain. You leave here, go down Main Street until you get to the old bridge, then turn left and follow a dirt road. There are some very simple houses there. Betty's house is one of the last ones, painted faded blue. But mister," the pharmacist interrupted him, "can I ask why you're interested?" Richard hesitated. How to explain that he couldn't get that child out of his head? How to say that the image of her falling on the ground had awakened ghosts that he had been trying to keep dormant for 18 years? "I saw her feeling unwell on the street the other day," he partially lied. "I wanted to know if she's okay." The pharmacist nodded, seeming to accept the explanation. "It's good to know that there are still people who care about others. Their situation isn't easy. Betty is very weak and the girl does what she can to help." Richard thanked him for the information and followed the directions given. The dirt road was bumpy and dusty, lined with some simple houses with yards where chickens pecked freely. The old reservoir, almost dry at that time of year, mirrored the orange sky of the late afternoon. When he spotted the faded blue house, his heart raced. It was smaller than he had imagined, with cracked walls and a small porch in front where some plants tried to survive in old cans. There was no gate, just a path of uneven stones leading to the peeling wooden door. Richard parked the car a few yards away and walked slowly towards the house. He could hear voices coming from inside, one deeper and tired, another sweet and childish that he recognized immediately. "Grandma, I managed to sell almost all the apples today," Lily said enthusiastically. "Look how many coins!" "That's good, my dear," replied a weak female voice, "but you shouldn't strain that leg too much. I worry when you're on your feet for too long." "Don't worry, Grandma. I'm strong." Richard stopped at the door, without the courage to knock. Through the small window, he could see the simple interior of the house. Old but clean furniture, aluminum pots stacked carefully, and in the corner, a bed where a lady with completely white hair and a face marked by age and illness lay. Lily was sitting next to the bed, counting her coins, one by one, for her grandmother, her face illuminated by the joy of having earned some money. Her right leg was stretched out in an odd position, and Richard noticed that she was no longer using the broken crutch. In its place, there was a broom handle that someone had tried to adapt, tying rags to the top to make it less uncomfortable. The sight of that simple scene, but full of love and determination, made something stir inside Richard's chest. For a moment he saw himself 18 years younger, sitting next to a hospital bed, holding the small, cold hand of his daughter, Carmen, while the doctors told him there was nothing more to do. He recoiled instinctively, his hands trembling. He wasn't ready to face that, not yet. He returned to the car and sat there for almost an hour, watching the house from a distance, fighting against the ghosts that this unknown girl had awakened in his soul. During the next 2 weeks, Richard developed a routine that he himself didn't fully understand. Every morning, before going to the mill, he passed by the dirt road leading to the faded blue house. He didn't stop, just slowed down enough to see if Lily was okay. He saw her leaving early in the morning, always with the adapted broom handle as a crutch, carrying a basket of apples that seemed too heavy for her thin arms. The girl had set up a small makeshift stall at the intersection of the dirt road and Main Street, using an old wooden crate as a table. In the 3rd week, Richard finally mustered the courage to stop. He parked the car a few yards before the stall and walked slowly towards it. Lily was organizing some slightly ripe bananas when she saw him approaching. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound casual. "How much are the bananas?" Lily looked up, and for a moment she seemed to recognize him, but couldn't remember from where. "Good morning, mister. 50 cents a pound." Richard knew the price was too cheap. In the stores downtown, bananas cost at least twice as much. "I'll take 2 pounds, he said, taking a $5 bill out of his wallet. Lily's eyes widened. "Mister, I don't have change for so much money." "You don't need to give me change," Richard replied, placing the bill in the girl's small hand. "Consider it a tip for the good quality of the fruit." Lily was silent for a moment, looking at the bill as if it were a treasure. "Are you sure? It's a lot of money." "I'm sure." "What's your name?" "Lily. And you?" "Richard. Nice to meet you, Lily." She smiled, and at that moment Richard felt a strange pang in his chest. Her smile was luminous, full of life, despite all the visible difficulties. It immediately reminded him of Carmen, who smiled the same way when he came home from work, and she ran to hug him. "Thank you, Mr. Richard," Lily said, carefully putting the bill in a small can. "Now I can buy Grandma Betty's medicine." "Is your grandma sick?" he asked, pretending not to know. "Yes, she is. She has a very bad cough, and sometimes she can't even get out of bed. But she's taken care of me since I was a baby, so now I take care of her." The maturity in the words of a 6-year-old child touched Richard deeply. "And where are your parents?" Lily's face darkened slightly. "My mom left when I was very little. Grandma Betty said she was too young and was afraid she couldn't take care of me. My dad, I never met him." Richard felt a lump in his throat. "Do you miss them?" "Sometimes," Lily admitted, nervously fiddling with the strap of the basket. "But Grandma Betty is all I need. She teaches me to read and write, tells me beautiful stories, and always says that I'm special even with my bad leg." "Your leg isn't bad," Richard said firmly. "It's just different, and that doesn't make you any less special." Lily looked at him in surprise. Most people avoided talking about her disability as if it was something shameful. "You're different from other adults," she said. "Why?" "Because you don't pretend you don't see my leg. And you don't feel sorry for me." Richard crouched down to her level. You know what I see when I look at you, Lily. I see a brave girl who takes care of her grandma, works hard selling fruit, and has the most beautiful smile I've ever seen." Lily's cheeks flushed. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" "If you want me to, yes." "I do. I can set aside the best apples for you." From that day on, Richard started visiting Lily's stall every morning. He always bought fruit, always paid more than necessary, but made sure it seemed natural. Gradually, they developed a genuine friendship. Lily started calling him Uncle Rick, and he loved to hear her stories about life in the neighborhood, her adventures trying to catch the chicks in the neighbor's yard, or her improvised lessons with Betty using old books they found in the trash. "Uncle Rick," she said one morning as he was picking out some oranges, "can I tell you a secret?" "Sure." "I dream of studying in a real school one day, with desks, a blackboard, and other boys and girls to be my friends." "And why don't you—" "Study," Lily sighed. "Grandma Betty said the school is too far away, and I can't walk that much with the crutch. Besides, I need to work to buy her medicine." Richard felt his heart clench. "Have you ever thought about—" "I don't know, having surgery on your leg?" "To make it easier to walk? Grandma Betty took me to the clinic once. The doctor said it can be fixed, but it costs a lot of money. Money we don't have." That night, Richard couldn't sleep again. He kept thinking about Lily, about her simple but seemingly impossible dreams, about how a 6-year-old child could have so much strength and determination. And mainly, he thought about Carmen, his daughter, who never had the chance to grow up, to have dreams, to face difficulties. The next morning, he arrived at the stall with a proposal he had thought about all night. "Lily," he said, "I would like to meet your grandmother Betty. Would she receive me at home?" The girl hesitated. "She doesn't really like visitors, Uncle." "Rick, she's embarrassed that the house is very simple." "That's okay. I just want to meet the person who raised such a special girl." Lily smiled. "I'll ask her. But Uncle Rick, why do you want to meet Grandma Betty?" Richard paused. How to explain that seeing Lily every day had awakened in him a need to care, to protect, to be useful in a way that he could no longer be for his own daughter. "Because you both have become very important to me," he said simply. What he didn't know was that, on the other side of town, Walter Thompson had noticed his morning visits to Lily's stall, and he was beginning to form dangerous ideas about how to use this information to his advantage. 3 days after the conversation about meeting Betty, Lily arrived at her stall with her eyes shining with excitement. Richard immediately noticed that she was different, happier than usual. "Uncle Rick, Grandma Betty said you can come have dinner with us tonight," she announced, almost jumping for joy. She even managed to get out of bed to tidy up the house. Richard felt a mixture of joy and nervousness. "Are you sure it won't be an inconvenience?" "Not at all. She was curious to meet the man who buys all my apples," Lily laughed. "But she asked me to warn you that dinner will be simple. Rice, beans, and some vegetables that the neighbor gave us." "That's perfect for me," Richard replied sincerely. "What time can I come?" "When it gets dark. Grandma said it's better that way, because she gets more tired during the day." That afternoon, Richard left the mill earlier and stopped at the supermarket. He bought some ingredients to complement dinner, but was careful not to overdo it. He didn't want Betty to feel offended or belittled by his generosity. As dusk fell, he drove down the now familiar dirt road, feeling his heart race. When he stopped in front of the faded blue house, he could see a yellowish light in the windows and the smell of home cooking in the air. Lily was waiting for him at the door, wearing her least torn dress and with her hair carefully combed. "Uncle Rick, Grandma is in the kitchen finishing dinner." Richard followed the girl inside the small house. The interior was even simpler than he had imagined when he observed from the window, but there was a special care in every detail. The peeling walls were decorated with drawings that Lily had made, and on the old table a vase with wildflowers gave color to the environment. "Good," "Evening," said a firm voice from the kitchen. Betty appeared in the doorway, leaning against the wall. At 78, she was a small and thin woman, with completely white hair tied in a simple bun. Despite her age and apparent illness, her eyes were lively and intelligent. "Mrs. Betty," Richard stepped forward to greet her. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for receiving me in your home." She studied him for a moment, assessing him with the experienced gaze of someone who had lived a long time. "The pleasure is mine. Lily doesn't stop talking about you." During dinner, Richard was impressed with Betty's education and intelligence. Despite her limited formal schooling, she spoke wisely about life, about Harmony Creek, about the difficulties of raising a child alone, and mainly she spoke about Lily with a love that was visible in every word. "This girl is the light of my life," Betty said, watching Lily eat intently. "Since she arrived in my arms, tiny as a bird, she has been my strength to continue." "Her mother was very young when she left?" Richard asked carefully. Betty's face darkened. "Delilah was only 17 when Lily was born. She was my youngest daughter, always kind of lost in life. When she found out she was pregnant, she panicked. She said she didn't know how to be a mother, that she was going to ruin the child's life." "And the father?" "A boy who worked at one of the mills in town. Delilah never wanted to say which one. When he found out about the pregnancy, he disappeared without a trace. Delilah became even more desperate." Lily, who had stopped eating to listen, interrupted timidly. "Grandma, tell Uncle Rick how my mom left me here." Betty sighed. "One morning I woke up and found Lily at my door, wrapped in an old blanket with a little note from Delilah saying that she was leaving so as not to harm her daughter, that when she managed to get her life together, she would come back to get the girl." "And she never came back?" Richard asked. "We never heard from her again. That was 6 years ago." Richard looked at Lily, who continued eating without showing sadness. For her, that was simply the reality she had always known. Betty was her mother, her father, her entire family. "Do you have children?" Betty asked, changing the subject. Richard swallowed hard. "I had a daughter. She passed away a few years ago." "I'm sorry," Betty said with genuine compassion. "Losing a child must be the worst pain in the world." "It is," Richard replied simply, his voice almost failing. Lily, noticing the sadness in his voice, reached out her little hand and touched Richard's arm. "Uncle Rick is sad." "A little," he admitted. "But being here with you makes me feel better." After dinner, while Lily was showing her drawings to Richard, Betty pulled him aside. "Can I talk to you about something?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Sure." "I know you have good intentions with Lily. I see it in the way you look at her, in the affection you have, but I need you to understand something. We are not people who accept charity." Richard was surprised by the frankness. "I don't—" "Let me finish," Betty interrupted gently. "I know you're a rich man, owner of mills," Lily told me, "and I also know that you feel sorry for our situation. But I want you to know that we have always managed on our own, and we intend to continue that way." "Mrs. Betty, I don't feel sorry for you. I have admiration." She studied him again with those penetrating eyes. "Admiration? Lily is the bravest and most determined child I have ever met. And that was only possible because you raised her with a lot of love and dignity. It's not pity I feel, it's respect." Betty remained silent for a moment. "Even so, we don't want your financial help. We have our pride." "I understand," Richard said. "But what if it wasn't help? What if it was friendship? What do you mean? What if I just continued buying Lily's apples, paying the fair price, of course, and sometimes came to have dinner here as a friend of the family?" Betty hesitated. "Don't you have your own family to take care of?" "No." Richard replied sadly. "I have no one." It was at that moment that something changed in Betty's gaze. Maybe she recognized in him the same loneliness that she herself carried, or maybe she realized that Lily had found in Richard something that had always been missing in her life, a father figure. "All right," she said finally, "but with one condition. Here you are not the rich businessman. Here you are just Richard, a friend of the family." Richard smiled, feeling something warm in his chest. "Deal." As he prepared to leave, Lily ran up to him. "Uncle Rick, can you come back tomorrow?" "Tomorrow, I'll buy your apples, as always," he promised. "And the day after tomorrow, also. And the day after that?" Richard laughed and hugged her. "I'll come back whenever you want." What none of them knew was that hidden behind a nearby tree, Walter Thompson had witnessed the entire scene. He had seen Richard enter the simple house, seen the intimacy of the conversation, seen the affectionate hug with the girl, and a very dangerous idea began to form in his mind. In the following 2 weeks, Richard's routine changed completely. He started the day visiting Lily's stall, spent the day working at the mill with more energy than he had felt in years, and 3 times a week he had dinner at the faded blue house with his 2 favorite women, as he had begun to think of Betty and Lily. The change did not go unnoticed by the mill employees. Martha, his secretary, commented with other employees that the boss was different, more smiling, less grumpy. Some workers noticed that he had started to greet them in the hallways, something he rarely did before. "Good morning, Uncle Rick," Lily shouted one morning, waving excitedly when she saw his car approaching. "Today I set aside the best oranges." "For you." Richard got out of the car, smiling. In recent days, he had noticed that Lily was rosier, more animated. Her diet had improved with the extra money from the fruit sales, and Betty had managed to buy the medicine she needed. "How is your grandma today?" he asked, choosing some oranges. "Better. Last night she managed to stand for almost an hour without getting tired. And look," Lily stepped away from the stool and walked a few steps without the makeshift crutch. "I managed to walk a little without support." Richard felt his heart clench with emotion. "Lily, that's wonderful." "Grandma Betty said it's because I'm eating better and taking the vitamins she bought at the pharmacy," the girl explained, returning to the box of fruit. "She said that sometimes our body just needs a little push to get strong." "Your grandmother is very wise," Richard agreed, paying for the fruit with the exact money for the first time in weeks. He had realized that Betty was embarrassed when he paid much more than the price, so now he tried to be more discreet with his generosity. "Uncle Rick," Lily said, organizing the money in the can, "can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Why are you so good to me and Grandma?" "It's not that I don't like it," she hastened to explain, "but most people don't care about us." Richard crouched down to her level, a question he had asked himself many times in recent weeks. "You know, Lily, sometimes we find special people in life, people who make us want to be better, happier. You two are like that for me." "We make you happy." "Very happy." Lily smiled, that radiant smile that always touched Richard's heart. "That's good, because you also make us happy." That afternoon, Richard was in an important meeting at the mill when Martha knocked on the office door with a worried expression. "Mr. Sterling, there's a man here wanting to talk to you. He said it's about a delicate matter." "Who is it?" "Walter Thompson. He said you know him." Richard frowned. He knew Walter by sight, knew he was a merchant in town, but they had never had any kind of business together. "Send him in." Walter entered the office with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was well-dressed as always, but there was something unpleasant about his posture, a poorly disguised arrogance. "Richard Sterling," he said, extending his hand. "Pleasure to meet you in person." "Walter," Richard replied, shaking the offered hand coldly. "How can I help you?" "Actually, I think I'm the one who can help you." Walter said, sitting in the chair in front of the desk without being invited. You see, I've been observing your recent activities, your morning visits to a certain neighborhood in town. Richard's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. I don't understand what you're talking about. Oh, of course you do. Walter chuckled softly. The girl with the crutch. Lily. Lovely child, isn't she? Although she's kind of crippled. Watch what you say, Richard said, his voice getting dangerously low. Easy, easy. Walter raised his hands in a gesture of false peace. I'm not judging. Everyone has their preferences. But look, Richard, you're a respected man in this town. Successful businessman, unblemished reputation. It would be a shame if people started talking about your sudden obsession with an orphan child. What do you want? Richard asked directly. Nothing much, Walter replied, crossing his legs comfortably. Let's say I need a small loan. $50,000. No interest, no rush to pay. Consider it an investment in maintaining your reputation. This is blackmail. This is protection. You know how people are, Richard. Rich man, single, no family, suddenly taking an interest in a poor disabled child. Tongues will start wagging. And once the gossip starts... Walter made an eloquent gesture with his hands. Richard felt the anger grow in his chest, but forced himself to remain in control. And if I don't accept your proposal? Well, that would be a shame, especially for the girl. Imagine how she would feel discovering that her beloved uncle, Rick, is seen as a pervert by the whole town, and the poor grandma having to deal with the malicious comments from the neighbors. You wouldn't do that. I would, Richard. In fact, I've already started. I talked to some people today, planted some seeds of doubt. Nothing too direct, you understand. Just comments about how strange it is for a man in your position to be so interested in a street child. Richard stood up abruptly, his hands resting on the table. Get out of my company, now. Walter stood up too, but without haste, clearly, satisfied with the effect his words had caused. Think about what we talked about, Richard. You have until Friday to decide. Oh, and if I were you, I'd avoid visiting the girl in the next few days. People are starting to notice. After Walter left, Richard stood in the middle of the office, trembling with anger and frustration. He knew the man wasn't bluffing. Walter had a reputation for being cruel and vindictive, and wouldn't hesitate to destroy Richard's reputation if it benefited him. But what tormented him most was thinking about how this would affect Lily. The girl had learned to trust him, to see him as a father figure. If he suddenly disappeared from her life, or worse, if she found out that people were talking badly about him because of her. That night, for the first time in weeks, Richard didn't go to dinner at the Blue House. He stayed in his apartment, drinking whiskey and trying to find a solution to the problem Walter had created. The next morning, when Lily saw him approaching the stall, she ran to meet him as she always did. But this time, Richard couldn't smile back. "Uncle Rick, are you okay? You seem sad," she said, touching his arm with concern. Richard looked at that child who had become so important in his life, and his heart broke. How to explain that he might need to distance himself from her to protect her? How to say that his presence in her life had become a danger? "Lily," he began, his voice failing, "maybe I can't come here every day anymore." The smile disappeared from the girl's face. "Why, Uncle Rick? Did I do something wrong?" Lily's question hit Richard like a punch in the stomach. Seeing the confusion and sadness in the eyes of that child he loved so much was almost unbearable. He knelt in front of her, struggling to find the right words. "You didn't do anything wrong, my dear," he said, his voice choked. "Never, never think that. It's just that sometimes adults have complicated problems to solve." "What kind of problems?" Lily asked, her big eyes full of concern. Richard didn't know how to explain blackmail and malice to a 6-year-old. "Work problems. Annoying things that I need to take care of. But you can solve them, can't you? You're very smart." The absolute faith in her voice broke Richard's heart even more. "I'll try, Lily, but maybe I need to stay away for a few days." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm going to miss you, Uncle Rick, and Grandma too. She always gets more excited when you come to dinner." "I'm going to miss you too," he admitted, hugging her quickly before getting up. "But it's not forever, okay? It's just for a while." Lily nodded, but Richard could see that she didn't really understand what was happening. He bought her apples as always, but this time he couldn't keep up the usual lively conversation. When he said goodbye, he had to struggle not to look back when he saw the girl waving sadly. During the next 3 days, Richard completely avoided that part of town. He threw himself into work with an intensity that worried his employees, staying at the mill late into the night so he wouldn't have to face the loneliness of his apartment. On Thursday, Martha knocked on his office door with a worried expression. "Mr. Sterling, there's a lady here wanting to talk to you. She says it's urgent." "Who is it?" "Betty Santos. She seems very agitated." Richard's heart raced. Betty had come to his mill. Something must be very wrong. "Send her in immediately." Betty entered the office, leaning on an old cane, clearly exhausted by the effort of having come all the way there. Her eyes were red, and Richard realized that she had been crying. "Mrs. Betty, what happened? How is Lily?" "That's what I came to talk about," she said, accepting the chair he offered. "Lily is not well. For 3 days she has barely eaten, barely spoken. She keeps asking what she did wrong for you to disappear like this." Richard felt as if he had been slapped. "I explained to her that it was work problems." "Richard," Betty interrupted, using his name for the first time. "That girl has spent her whole life seeing people leave without explanation. First her father, who disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. Then her mother, who fled in the dead of night. Now you, it's not like that, Mrs. Betty. I didn't want to leave." "Then why did you?" she asked directly. "What happened for you to simply disappear from her life after weeks of being like a father to her?" Richard ran his hands over his face, exhausted. How to explain to Betty about Walter's blackmail without sounding like a coward? "It's complicated," he muttered. "Life is always complicated, my son," Betty said firmly. "But we don't abandon those we love because of complication." "I didn't abandon her. I'm trying to protect her." "Protect her from what?" Richard was silent for a long moment. Finally, he decided to tell the truth. He related the entire conversation with Walter, the blackmail, the threats to spread malicious rumors throughout the town. Betty listened to everything in silence, her face becoming increasingly serious. When he finished, she sighed deeply. "So, you preferred to hurt Lily, to protect yourself from the comments of others?" "That's not it. I'm trying to protect her too. If people start talking badly—" "Richard," Betty said, interrupting him again, "do you think I don't know what people say about me? A poor old woman raising a disabled granddaughter. Do you think I don't hear the malicious comments, the gossip, the opinions about how I should have put the girl in an orphanage?" Richard was silent, surprised. "The difference is that I never let the opinion of others stop me from loving my granddaughter. Because at the end of the day, what matters is the 3 of us, me, her, and now you. But Walter can say whatever he wants," Betty said with determination. "The people who matter know what kind of man you are, and the ones who don't, well, those were never going to like you anyway." Richard looked at that 78-year-old woman, physically fragile, but with an inner strength that impressed him. "You don't understand. My reputation, my business." "No, my son, you're the one who doesn't understand," Betty replied. "Lily isn't eating, she isn't sleeping, she isn't playing. She's withering because she thinks she isn't worthy of being loved. Again." Betty's words echoed in the office like thunder. Richard imagined Lily at home, sad and confused, thinking that she had done something wrong to push away another important person from her life. "What do I do?" he asked, genuinely lost. "You go back," Betty said simply. "You face this Walter." and anyone who wants to talk badly, and you show Lily that she is worth more than the opinion of small and malicious people. And if things get ugly, if he really spreads rumors? Betty got up from the chair, leaning on the cane. Richard, can I tell you a secret? Sure. 18 years ago, when Delilah ran away and left me with a baby to raise, I had two options. Worry about what people were going to say, or simply love that child with all the strength in my heart. I chose to love, and I don't regret it for a second. She walked to the door but stopped before leaving. That girl sees you as the father she never had, and you, whether you want to or not, have become the father she deserves. The question is, are you going to keep being, or are you going to let a bad man like Walter Thompson decide the future of your family? After Betty left, Richard was alone, in his office, thinking about her words, family. That's what she had called it, his family. That afternoon, for the first time in days, he drove towards Lily's stall. When he saw her from afar, his heart almost stopped. The girl was sitting behind her box of fruit, but she wasn't trying to sell to anyone. She was just looking at the road, as if she was waiting for someone. When she saw his car approaching, she got up so quickly that she almost fell. Her eyes lit up with a joy that made Richard feel both happy and guilty. "Uncle Rick!" she shouted, running towards him with the crutch banging on the ground. "You're back!" Richard got out of the car and hugged her tightly, feeling her tremble with emotion in his arms. "Yes, my dear, I'm back, and this time I'm never leaving again." "Promise." "I promise," he said, and at that moment decided that he would face Walter, and any consequences that came, because Betty was right. Lily was worth more than anything. The next morning, Richard arrived at work with a determination he hadn't felt in years. He had spent the night thinking about how to deal with Walter, and had come to the conclusion that he could no longer run from the confrontation. But before anything else, he needed professional help. He called Dr. Robert Anderson, a criminal lawyer he knew from college, and who now had a respected office in town. "Robert, I need to talk to you about a blackmail case," Richard said directly on the phone. "Blackmail? Richard, what's going on?" "I prefer to explain in person. Can you see me today?" "Sure. Come at 2 in the afternoon." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Walter Thompson was at the local bar, sipping a beer and talking to some acquaintances about certain suspicious situations he had observed recently. He didn't mention names directly, but his insinuations were clear enough to plant seeds of doubt. "It's worrying when a rich single man suddenly develops this interest in an orphan child," he said, shaking his head with false concern. "Especially a disabled, vulnerable girl. You never know what the real intentions are." Some men at the bar agreed vaguely, others seemed uncomfortable with the conversation. But Walter knew that it only took a few well-placed comments for the gossip to spread through the small town like wildfire. At the faded blue house, Lily was more animated than she had been in days. Betty, watching her granddaughter play in the yard, sighed in relief. The girl had started eating properly again, and had even tried a few steps without the crutch that morning. "Grandma," Lily said, entering the kitchen where Betty was preparing lunch, "Uncle Rick really isn't leaving anymore. He promised, didn't he?" "He promised, but people sometimes break promises, right, Grandma?" Betty put down the spoon and knelt next to her granddaughter, holding her small hands. "My dear, Uncle Rick isn't like other people who have passed through our life. He's different." "How do you know?" "Because I see in his eyes the same love that I feel for you, and that kind of love doesn't go away so easily." In the afternoon at Dr. Anderson's office, Richard related the entire situation in detail. The lawyer listened carefully, making occasional notes. "Richard, this is clear and simple blackmail," Robert said when he finished, "and you have elements to prove it. This Walter was very imprudent in making such direct threats. The problem is that he may not be bluffing about spreading the rumors, and once the gossip starts... Exactly. That's why we need to act quickly and intelligently. Robert leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. First, you're going to record any future conversation with him. Second, we're going to gather character witnesses who can attest to your integrity. Third, I'm going to prepare a complaint for the crime of blackmail, and if he has already started spreading the stories, then we have defamation and slander too. Richard, you can't give in to this kind of coercion. If you pay once, he'll always come back. Richard nodded, feeling more confident. What do I do if he contacts me again? You record everything and call me immediately. On Friday, exactly as Walter had promised, he showed up at Richard's mill again. This time, however, Richard was prepared. He had a small recorder in his pocket, and Dr. Anderson was a phone call away. "Richard," Walter said with false cordiality, "I hope you've thought about our conversation." "I have," Richard replied, keeping his tone neutral, "and I came to the conclusion that you can go to hell." Walter's smile disappeared. "That's not a very smart decision, Richard, especially considering that some people in town are already commenting about your strange habits." "What habits would those be?" Richard asked, keeping the recorder running. "Oh, a respected businessman who suddenly develops an obsession with a street child, who spends hours in her house alone with a 6-year-old girl. People have fertile imaginations, you know. And you're spreading these lies? Me? No. I just commented to some friends about my genuine concern for the well-being of the child. It's our obligation as citizens, don't you think?" Richard felt the anger boil in his veins, but he controlled himself. "And what do you want exactly?" "I've already said. $50,000, no interest, no rush, and I'll make sure those unpleasant comments disappear." "And if I don't pay?" Walter smiled maliciously. "Well, I think that by Monday the whole of Harmony Creek will be commenting about the perverted businessman who takes advantage of disabled children. It would be a shame, wouldn't it? Especially for the girl. Imagine how she would feel being pointed at in the street as a victim of a creep." It was at that moment that Richard completely lost control. Without thinking, he stood up and grabbed Walter by the collar of his shirt. "If you lay a finger on Lily, if you say a word that is against her, Ah, now you show your true nature," Walter said, wriggling free. "Physical violence? This only confirms my suspicions about you." Richard released him, realizing that he had made a mistake. "Get out of my company." "With pleasure, but remember, Monday is the deadline." "Oh, and Richard," Walter stopped at the door, "maybe you should drop by the local bar tonight. There are a lot of people interested in talking about you." After Walter left, Richard immediately called Dr. Anderson. "I managed to record everything," he said, "but I made a mistake. I physically attacked him." "Richard, you can't do that. Now he has ammunition against you too." I know, but when he threatened..." "Lily, I couldn't control myself." "All right, we'll deal with that. Bring the recording here now. And Richard, don't do anything else without consulting me first." That night, Richard drove to the faded blue house with a heavy heart. He knew he needed to tell Betty and Lily what was happening. He could no longer protect them by keeping them in the dark. He found them both in the yard, Lily playing with some kittens that had appeared there, while Betty sewed by the light of a lantern. "Uncle Rick," Lily shouted, running to hug him. "Look how many kittens. Can I keep one?" "Of course you can," he said, hugging her tightly. Then he looked at Betty. "Mrs. Betty, I need to talk to you about something serious." Betty immediately sensed the gravity in his tone. "Lily, go play inside for a little bit. The adults need to talk." When they were alone, Richard told them everything, the blackmail, the threats, the rumors that Walter was spreading. Betty listened in silence, her face growing paler and paler. "My God," she murmured when he finished. "What kind of person does something like that?" "A bad person," Richard replied. "But Mrs. Betty, I need you to know, I'm not going to give in, I'm not going to pay him, and I'm not going to stay away from you, no matter what he does. And if people really start believing these lies," Richard took a deep breath, "then we'll face it together. Because you were right. You're my family now, and you don't abandon family." At that moment, Lily appeared at the door, carrying a small orange kitten. "Can I name him Richard?" she asked, innocent of all the tension in the air. Richard smiled, feeling a wave of love and determination. "You can, my dear, you can." But while they were talking on the other side of town, Walter was fulfilling his threat, spreading increasingly elaborate stories about Richard's true intentions with Lily. On Monday morning, Richard woke up with a strange feeling in his stomach. He knew that Walter had given him the deadline until that day, and during the weekend, some different looks on the street had already confirmed that the rumors were spreading. People who used to greet him with respect now looked away or whispered when he passed. Upon arriving at the mill, he noticed that some employees were watching him strangely. Martha, his secretary, seemed uncomfortable when he passed through the reception area. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she said, avoiding eye contact. "You have some calls to return." Calls. "Some clients cancelled meetings. They said they'll reschedule when it's more convenient." Richard felt his stomach sink. The rumors were starting to affect his business too. In the late morning, Dr. Anderson called with urgent news. "Richard, I got a search warrant to investigate Walter's activities, but there's something you need to know. I received information that he's planning something for today." "What kind of thing?" "I don't know exactly, but a source told me that he commented about solving the problem definitely. Be alert." Richard hung up the phone with a bad feeling. He decided to leave the mill early and stop by Lily's stall, just to make sure everything was okay. When he got there, he found the stall empty. The box of fruit was overturned on the ground, and some oranges scattered on the dirt road. His heart raced. "Lily!" he shouted, running towards the blue house. He found the door open and Betty sitting in a chair, crying silently. Lily was in the corner of the room, hugging the orange kitten, with her eyes red from crying so much. "What happened?" Richard asked, kneeling next to them. "Some people came here this morning," Betty said with a choked voice. "They said they were from Child Protective Services, that they had received complaints about Lily's situation." "What do you mean?" "They said that a disabled child shouldn't be working on the street begging, that I'm not able to take care of her properly because of my age and my health." Richard felt the anger grow in his chest. "What else?" "They said that you were being investigated for suspicious behavior with children." Betty barely managed to pronounce the words, "that Lily may be in danger staying near you." "That's a lie," Richard exploded. "Outright lie." "I know it's a lie," Betty said, "but they didn't want to listen. They said they're coming back on Friday to take Lily to a temporary foster home while they investigate the situation." Lily, who had been quiet until then, stood up and ran to Richard. "Uncle Rick, are they going to take me away from Grandma? I don't want to go. I didn't do anything wrong." Richard hugged her tightly, feeling tears burn his eyes. "No one is going to take you away from your grandmother, my dear, I promise." "But how are you going to stop them?" Betty asked. "They said they have legal authority." "I'm going to find a way," Richard said, more determined than ever. "I'm not going to let Walter destroy our family." That afternoon, Richard met urgently with Dr. Anderson at the lawyer's office. He took Betty along so she could tell exactly what had happened. "This doesn't make sense," Robert said after hearing the account. "Child Protective Services doesn't act like that so quickly, without prior investigation, and they would never mention an ongoing criminal investigation to the family." "Then who were these people?" Betty asked. "Probably people hired by Walter to pose as authorities," Robert replied. "It's a serious crime, but effective for intimidating you." "Does that mean it was all a lie?" Richard asked. Most likely. But the problem is that Walter can even file a real complaint if you don't give in to his demands. So what do we do? Robert took a deep breath. We're going to speed up our process against him, and Richard, you're going to have to make a difficult decision. What? If things get really ugly, if he manages to manipulate the real authorities, maybe you need to temporarily stay away from Lily, just until we prove your innocence. No, Richard said immediately, I'm not going to abandon her again, even if it's to protect her. I've already tried to protect her by staying away. I only managed to hurt her more. Betty, who had been quiet during the conversation, spoke up. Dr. Anderson, how long would it take to prove that these accusations are false? With the recordings we have of Walter, and if we can prove that he hired people to pose as authorities, a few weeks, maybe a month. A month is too long, Richard said. Lily won't be able to handle another abandonment. That night, the three returned to the Blue House disheartened. Lily was waiting for them in the yard, playing with the kitten. But it was obvious that she was forcing normality. So, Grandma, what did the doctor say? She asked when she saw them arrive. Betty looked at Richard, not knowing what to answer. How to explain to a 6-year-old child that a bad man was trying to separate them out of pure malice? He said he's going to help us, Richard replied, crouching down next to her. But Lily, I need you to be very brave. Some bad things may happen in the next few days. What kind of bad things? People may tell lies about me. They may say that I'm not a good person. But that's a lie, Lily protested. You're the best person in the world. I know you know that, and Grandma Betty knows. But other people may believe the lies. And then I'm going to prove their lies. But in the meantime, you need to trust me no matter what happens. Can you do that? Lily nodded with determination. I can, Uncle Rick. The next morning, Richard woke up to the phone ringing insistently. It was Martha, his secretary, with a changed voice. Mr. Sterling, you need to come to the mill now. There are some people from the police here wanting to talk to you. Richard's blood ran cold. Police? Yes, sir. 2 investigators. They said, it's about a complaint. Richard dressed quickly and drove to the mill with his heart pounding out of rhythm. When he arrived, he found 2 men in suits waiting in his office. Mr. Richard Sterling, one of them asked. That's me. We are investigators from the Child and Adolescent Protection Precinct. We received an anonymous complaint about possible child abuse. We would like to ask some questions. Richard felt the world spin around him. Walter had fulfilled his threat. The investigation was real now. I would like to call my lawyer, he said, trying to keep his voice firm. Of course. But Mr. Sterling, in the meantime, it would be better to avoid contact with the minor in question, for her good and yours. At that moment, Richard understood that Walter had won the first battle. It didn't matter that the accusations were false. While they were being investigated, he couldn't see Lily, and she, once again, was going to feel abandoned without understanding why. The next 3 days were the worst of Richard's life since Carmen's death. He couldn't visit Lily, he couldn't call, he couldn't even pass near the Blue House. Dr. Anderson had been clear. Any contact during the investigation could be interpreted as an attempt to influence the victim. At the mill, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. 2 major clients had cancelled contracts, citing image issues. Employees whispered in the hallways, and Richard could feel the judging looks wherever he went. On Thursday afternoon, Dr. Anderson appeared in his office with a somber expression. I have news about the investigation, he said, closing the door behind him. Bad news? Mixed. The good news is that the investigators are serious professionals. They're not buying Walter's story easily. The bad news is that he was very clever. What do you mean? He didn't file the complaint directly. He used a woman who presented herself as a concerned neighbor. She reported having seen you in suspicious Situations with the girl, always vaguely enough to not be prosecuted for false statement. Richard slammed his fist on the table. And they believed it? Not exactly, but they are obligated to investigate. The good news is that I have already identified this woman. It's Sonia Peterson, a former employee of Walter's store. I have reason to believe that he paid her to make the complaint. Is that a crime? If we can prove it, yes. False accusation, defamation, several things. But Richard, there's something else you need to know. What now? The investigators want to hear Lily tomorrow. They're going to interrogate her about your relationship. Richard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. A 6-year-old child? Is that legal? Unfortunately, yes, and worse, they're going to separate her from Betty during the testimony to avoid external influence. My God, Richard murmured, she's going to be terrified. Exactly. That's why. We need to act fast. I got a meeting with the responsible officer for tonight. I'm going to show the recordings of Walter and try to get them to see that you're victims of a setup. Meanwhile, at the Blue House, Lily was inconsolable. It had been 3 days since she had seen Uncle Rick, and Betty had tried to explain that he was having problems at work, but the girl wasn't stupid. "Grandma, Uncle Rick abandoned me again, didn't he?" she asked, hugging the orange kitten. "No, my dear, he didn't abandon you." "Then why isn't he coming? Why didn't he even send a message?" Betty didn't know what to answer. How to explain to a child that bad men sometimes do terrible things to good people. "Sometimes adults have very complicated problems," she said, hugging her granddaughter. "But that doesn't mean he stopped liking you." "Did I do something wrong? Grandma, did I say something that made him angry?" "No, Lily, you didn't do anything wrong, never." That night at the police station, Dr. Anderson presented the evidence to Officer Mark Miller, a 50-year-old man known for his honesty and competence. "Dr. Anderson, these recordings are enlightening," the officer said after hearing everything. "But I need to be honest. I can't simply dismiss the case based only on this. I understand, but you can see that there is a clear motivation for false accusations." "I can. And we are already investigating this Walter Thompson too. But in the meantime, the protocol is clear. We have to hear the child. Officer, this girl has suffered a lot in life. She sees Richard as a father figure. Interrogating her will traumatize her even more." The officer sighed. "Doctor, I have children too. I don't like this situation at all. But if we don't follow protocol, and then we discover that there was really something wrong, so there's nothing we can do." "There is, if you can prove definitively that this Sonia Peterson was paid to make the complaint. I can speed up the dismissal of the case." "How much time do we have?" "The girl's testimony is scheduled for tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. If you don't get anything by then—" On Friday morning, Richard was desperate. Dr. Anderson had worked all night trying to find evidence of the connection between Walter and Sonia, but had found nothing concrete. At 9 in the morning, Richard was in his office when Martha knocked. On the door, "Mr. Sterling, there's a young woman here saying she needs to talk to you urgently. She seems very nervous." "Who is it?" "She said her name is Delilah Santos." Richard frowned. The last name was the same as Betty and Lily, but he had never heard of any Delilah. "Send her in." The woman who entered the office was young, around her early 30s, with brown hair and eyes that vaguely resembled Lily's. She was visibly nervous, fidgeting with her hands and avoiding eye contact. "Mr. Sterling, my name is Delilah Santos. I worked at one of your mills a few years ago." "Delilah Santos," Richard repeated, trying to remember. Then, like a lightning bolt, the connection was made in his mind. "Santos, I'm Lily's mother," she said quickly, tears starting to run down her face. "And I came here because I heard that they're accusing you of terrible things because of my daughter." Richard was speechless for a moment. Lily's mother, who had disappeared 6 years ago, was standing there in front of him. "How did you hear about the accusations?" "I work at a seamstress here downtown. People don't stop talking about it. About the businessman who's being investigated because of a disabled girl." Delilah wiped her nose with a tissue. "When I found out it was Lily, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." You followed her life all these years?" "From afar," admitted Delilah, her voice full of shame. "I sent money to my mother sometimes when I could. I passed by the house to see if she was okay, but always hidden. I didn't have the courage to come back." "Why?" "Because I was a girl when I ran away. I was 17, pregnant, scared, alone. I thought it would be better for Lily to stay with my mother, who at least had experience taking care of children." Richard watched her in silence. He could see the genuine suffering in her eyes, the guilt she carried for having abandoned her daughter. "And what changed now?" he asked. "I found out that my daughter found someone who really takes care of her, someone who loves her." Delilah looked him directly in the eyes for the first time. "And that someone is being persecuted for doing exactly what I didn't have the courage to do, love my daughter." "Delilah." "Mr. Sterling, I know who Walter Thompson is. I've known him since I was a teenager. I know what kind of person he is, and I know that he's capable of anything to get what he wants." Richard's heart raced. "Do you have any proof that he's behind the accusations?" "Better than that," said Delilah, taking an envelope from her bag. "I have a recording." "What do you mean?" "Last night I was coming home from work when I saw Walter talking to Sonia Peterson at the bar. I suspected the conversation and recorded it with my cell phone." She handed the phone to Richard. "Listen." Richard pressed play and heard Walter's unmistakable voice. "Sonia, did you do exactly as I told you? Did you tell the police exactly what we agreed?" "I did, Walter. But I'm scared. What if they find out I lied?" "They won't find out anything, and you'll still get the other $1,000 when the case goes forward." Richard looked at Delilah in disbelief. "This is the proof you needed," she completed. "Mr. Sterling, I can't undo the harm I caused by abandoning my daughter, but I can prevent them from harming the man she chose as her father." Richard immediately called Dr. Anderson, who arrived at the office in less than 20 minutes. When he heard the recording, the lawyer couldn't hide his relief. "Delilah, this is exactly what we needed," he said. "With this evidence, I can ask for the immediate dismissal of the case and still sue Walter for several crimes." "So Lily doesn't need to be interrogated?" Richard asked anxiously. "No. I'm going straight to the precinct now. In a few hours, this nightmare will be over." After Dr. Anderson left, Richard was alone with Delilah in the office. The situation was strange and emotionally charged. He didn't quite know how to react to the mother of the child he had learned to love as a daughter. "Why did it take you so long to show up?" he asked. "Finally." Delilah sighed deeply. "Because I'm a coward. Because for 6 years I convinced myself that Lily was better off without me, that my mother was more capable of taking care of her than I was. And now I know that I can't run away anymore, that my daughter deserves to know her mother, even if that mother is an imperfect person full of mistakes." "Delilah, you have to understand something," Richard said, choosing his words carefully. "Lily doesn't know who you are. To her, Betty is her mother, her family. You can't just show up and expect that." "I know," she interrupted. "I didn't come here to take my daughter away. I came because I found out that she has someone who really loves her, and that someone is being persecuted for it." "So what's your plan?" Delilah hesitated. "I want to meet her. I want to ask my mother for forgiveness. And if If it's possible, I want to be part of Lily's life, not as a mother who abandons, but as, I don't know, as a person who wants to make up for the mistakes of the past. Richard watched her for a long moment. He could see sincerity in her eyes, but he also knew that the situation was delicate. Lily had already suffered enough abandonment for a lifetime. "This has to be very gradual," he said finally. "And it has to be what's best for Lily, not for us adults." "I completely agree." 2 hours later, Dr. Anderson called with the best news Richard had received in a week. "Richard, the case has been dismissed." The officer heard the recording and was furious with the situation. "Walter and Sonia have been arrested for false reporting, defamation, and conspiracy. The officer is also going to investigate the people who posed as Child Protective Services." "Can I see Lily?" "You can. In fact, the officer recommends that you go there as soon as possible. The girl needs to know that everything has been resolved." Richard could barely contain himself. "Robert, I don't know how to thank you." "Thank Delilah. She's the one who saved the situation." Richard looked at Delilah, who had followed the entire telephone conversation. Do you want to come with me?" he asked. "To see Lily?" Delilah turned pale. "I don't know if I'm ready, and what are we going to tell her?" "The truth, always the truth." Half an hour later, they were driving down the dirt road towards the blue house. Delilah was visibly nervous, her hands trembling as she looked out the window. "How is she?" "Physically, I mean," she asked. "Beautiful, intelligent, brave. Betty did a wonderful job raising her. And the leg can be corrected with surgery. I've already talked to specialists, but that's your decision." When they arrived in front of the house, they could see Lily in the yard, sitting under the small tree, holding the orange kitten. She wasn't playing, she was just looking at the road with a sad expression that broke both of their hearts. "My God," murmured Delilah, tears starting to stream down her face. She's beautiful." Richard got out of the car first. "Lily!" The girl raised her head, and when she saw who it was, her face lit up like the sun. She dropped the kitten and ran towards him, stumbling on the makeshift crutch, but without caring. "Uncle Rick! Uncle Rick! You're back!" she shouted, throwing herself into his arms. Richard hugged her tightly, feeling tears stream down his face. "I'm back, my dear, and this time I'm never leaving again. Promise?" "I promise." It was then that Lily noticed the woman who had gotten out of the other side of the car. She observed her with curiosity, noticing something familiar that she couldn't identify. "Who is she, Uncle Rick?" Richard looked at Delilah, who was standing a few feet away, clearly too emotional to approach. "Lily, this is a very special person, someone who came from far away to meet you." At that moment, Betty appeared in the doorway of the house, leaning on her cane. When she saw who was there, her face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, sadness, and finally a tired resignation. "Delilah," she said simply. "Hi, Mom," replied Delilah, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily looked from one to the other, trying to understand the situation. "Grandma, who is Delilah?" Betty took a deep breath, looking at her granddaughter with infinite tenderness. "Delilah is your mother, my dear." The silence that followed was deafening. Lily looked at Delilah, then at Betty, then at Richard, trying to process the information. "My mother," she repeated, confused. "But didn't you leave when I was a baby?" Delilah finally found the courage to approach. She knelt in front of her daughter, maintaining a respectful distance. "I did," she said, her voice choked, "and it was the biggest mistake of my life. I was too young, too scared, and I thought you would be better off with Grandma Betty." "And now you're back to take me away?" Lily asked, instinctively moving closer to Richard. "No," replied Delilah quickly. "I didn't come to take you away from the people who love you. I came to meet the beautiful girl you've become. and to ask for forgiveness for having left. Lily was silent for a long moment, studying Delilah's face. Finally, she asked, "Are you going to leave again?" "Only if you want me to go." "And if I don't want you to?" "Then I'll stay, and I'll try to be the mother you deserve, even if it's too late." Lily looked at Richard as if seeking guidance. He nodded encouragingly. Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course you can, my dear," replied Delilah. "You can take all the time you need." Betty, who had watched the conversation from the door, finally approached the group. She looked at her daughter with a mixture of hurt and relief. "Delilah, you hurt this girl a lot when you left," she said. "And you hurt me too. If you want to be part of her life now, you're going to have to prove that you've changed." "I know, Mom, and I will prove it, every day, if necessary." That afternoon, the four sat in the yard of the Blue House for a conversation that would change their lives forever. Lily, with the strange wisdom of children who had gone through much suffering, asked direct questions and received honest answers. She learned why her mother had left. She learned why Richard had temporarily stayed away. She learned about the bad man who had tried to separate them. And gradually she began to understand that sometimes adults made mistakes out of fear or out of trying to protect the people they loved. "So now I have a mom, a grandma, and an uncle?" she asked at the end of the conversation. "If you want," replied Richard. Lily smiled, that radiant smile that always warmed the heart of everyone around. "I want to. That way I can have more people to love me and for me to love too." And at that moment, sitting in the simple yard of a humble house in the outskirts of Harmony Creek, a different and imperfect family began to form, united not by blood or by conventions, but by love and by the choice not to give up on each other. In the 2 weeks following the reunion, a new dynamic began to establish itself in everyone's life. Delilah had gotten a better job at a clothing factory downtown and rented a small room near Betty's house to be close, but without invading the space that Lily already considered her home. Richard watched with admiration how Lily was handling the situation. The girl had not simply accepted Delilah back as if nothing had happened. Instead, she was gradually building a new relationship based on the present, not the lost past. "Delilah," Lily said one afternoon when her mother came to visit them, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, my dear." "Why didn't you try to see me even once in all these years? Not even hidden?" The direct question, made with the cruel innocence of children, made Delilah swallow hard. She had prepared for this conversation with Betty, but answering directly to Lily was much more difficult. "Because I was ashamed," she admitted. "Ashamed of having abandoned you, afraid that you would hate me, afraid of not knowing how to be a mother." "But you could have learned," said Lily, with a simple logic that touched the heart of the matter. "I could have, and it was my mistake. Not to try." Lily was quiet for a moment, swinging her legs in the small chair where she was sitting. "You know what I think?" she said finally. "What?" "I think you were a scared girl when you had me, and scared girls sometimes do wrong things, but now you're not a scared girl anymore." The simplicity of Lily's observation made Delilah cry. Betty, who was watching the conversation from the kitchen, felt her heart clench. Her granddaughter had found a way to forgive that was both mature and childish, understanding but not naive. "No," agreed Delilah, wiping her tears. "Now I'm not a scared girl anymore. So can you learn to be my mom now?" "I can try. If you let me." Lily nodded, as if the question were settled in her mind. "But Grandma Betty is still my grandma who raised me, and Uncle Rick is still my uncle of the heart, okay?" "Okay," agreed Delilah, laughing through her tears. Meanwhile, Richard was dealing with the consequences of the investigation in his professional life. Although he had been completely exonerated, some clients were still wary. Rumors were difficult to undo, even when the truth came to light. "Mr. Sterling," said Martha one morning. "Mr. Johnson from Northern Fabrics called. He wants to reschedule the meeting he had cancelled." "Great. And the others?" "Some have already returned the call, but some are still hesitant." Richard sighed. He knew it would take time to completely rebuild his reputation, but he didn't regret anything. He preferred 1,000 times to lose business than to lose Lily. That afternoon, he drove to the Blue House for what had become his daily visit. He found a scene that filled him with emotion. Lily was in the yard teaching Delilah to play with the orange kitten, while Betty watched from the porch with a smile on her face. "Uncle Rick," shouted Lily when she saw him arrive. "Look, Delilah managed to get Augustino to jump into her lap." Richard laughed, watching how the relationship between mother and daughter was developing. It wasn't the instant love of the movies, but something more real and lasting, a careful construction based on small, shared moments. "Lily," he said, "I have news for you." "What news?" she asked, running closer to him. "I managed to schedule your appointment with the orthopedic specialist, Dr. Matthews, in Columbus. He can assess your leg and see the possibilities for treatment." Lily's eyes lit up. "Do you think he can make my leg look like the other one?" "I don't know, my dear, but he can tell us what's possible." Delilah approached, visibly moved. "Richard, how much is this treatment going to cost?" "That's not a problem," he replied. "What matters is giving Lily every opportunity." "I can't let you pay alone," insisted Delilah. "She's my daughter too." "Delilah," Betty intervened from the porch, "accept the help. You can contribute in other ways." "How?" "By being present, by being a mother. That's priceless." The following Saturday, the four made the trip to Columbus. It was the first time they had all gone out together, and Lily was radiant with excitement at seeing a bigger city. Dr. Matthews was a gentle and experienced man who knew how to deal with Lily's anxiety during the exam. After assessing X-rays and doing several tests, he met with the adults to explain the situation. "The good news is that Lily's condition can be significantly improved," he said. "We're not get a full correction, but with surgery and physical therapy, she can have a much better quality of life." "What's the procedure?" Richard asked. "Surgery to correct the bone alignment, followed by about 6 months of intensive physical therapy. It's a long process, but the results are usually excellent." "And the risks?" asked Delilah, holding Betty's hand. "Minimal. Lily is young and healthy. Her body will respond well to the treatment." When they left the office, Lily was anxious to know the verdict. "So, can the doctor help my leg?" she asked. "Yes, he can," Richard replied, crouching down to her level. "But it's going to be a long treatment. You'll need to have surgery and then do exercises every day for several months." "Will it hurt?" "A little at first. But each day it will hurt less, and each day you will get stronger." Lily thought for a moment. "And then I'll be able to run like the other kids." "You'll be able to do a lot more things than you can today," promised Dr. Matthews, who had followed the conversation. "Then I want to do it," Lily decided with determination. On the way back to Harmony Creek, the silence in the car was contemplative. Everyone was processing the changes that were to come. Finally, Lily broke the silence. "Uncle Rick, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why do you do all this for me? Pay for medicine for Grandma, buy more expensive apples, take me to the doctor. Why do you love me so much?" The question caught Richard off guard. He drove in silence for a few moments, thinking about the answer. "You know, Lily, a long time ago I lost someone very important to me, a girl your age, and after that I thought I would never be able to love someone like that again. And now you can. Now I discovered that our heart doesn't break forever. Sometimes it's just hidden, waiting for the right person to appear to remind it of how good it is to love someone. And I'm that right person. You are exactly that right person." Delilah, who was listening from the passenger window, discreetly wiped away a tear. She was learning not only to be a mother, but also observing how a real father loved. Richard was showing her what it meant to put a child's well-being above everything else. "Delilah," Lily said suddenly, "do you love me too?" "Yes, I do," replied Delilah without hesitation. "I always have. Even when I was far away, I always have. So now I have 3 people who really love me." "You do," confirmed Betty from the back seat, "and the 4 of us are going to form a different family, but a real family." That night, back at the Blue House, while Lily slept, hugging the orange kitten, the 3 adults talked about the next steps. The surgery was scheduled for a month from then, and that meant changes for everyone. "I'm going to take a leave of absence from work to take care of her during the recovery," said Delilah. "And I'm going to reorganize my schedule to be present whenever necessary," added Richard. "And I," said Betty with a smile, "I'm finally going to be able to rest a little, knowing that my granddaughter has so many people taking care of her." For the first time in 6 years, Betty felt truly at peace about Lily's future. The month leading up to the surgery passed quickly, but not without its turbulence. 3 weeks before the scheduled date, Betty fainted while preparing lunch. Lily, who was playing in the yard, ran desperately to tell the neighbors. "Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson, Grandma fell in the kitchen and she won't get up," she shouted, banging on the neighbor's door in despair. Mrs. Johnson, a middle-aged woman who always helped when needed, ran to the Blue House and found Betty on the kitchen floor, pale but conscious. "Betty, what happened?" "I got dizzy suddenly," murmured the elderly woman, trying to get up. "It must be the heat." "No way, I'm going to call Richard and take you to the hospital." Richard arrived in 15 minutes and found Lily in a panic, hugging the orange kitten, while Mrs. Johnson helped Betty sit in a chair. "Grandma, are you going to be okay?" asked Lily, her eyes full of tears. "I will, my dear, it's just a scare." But when they arrived at the hospital, the exams revealed that it wasn't just a scare. Betty's blood pressure was dangerously high, and she showed signs of severe exhaustion. "Mrs. Betty," the doctor said, "after analyzing the results, you have a case of severe hypertension associated with stress and fatigue. You need absolute rest for at least 2 weeks." "2 weeks?" protested Betty. "Doctor, I have a granddaughter to take care of. I can't stay in bed." "That's exactly why you're in this situation," replied the doctor. "You've been pushing yourself beyond your limit for years. You need to rest. Otherwise, you may have much more serious complications." Outside the room, Richard was talking to Delilah about what to do. "She can't stay alone with Lily," said Delilah, worried. "And Lily can't see her grandmother sick like that, so close to her own surgery. What's your suggestion?" I think Lily should stay with me these 2 weeks." Richard looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure? It's a big responsibility." "She's my daughter, Richard. It's time for me to take that responsibility for real." And when they returned to the room, they found Lily sitting next to the bed, holding Betty's hand. "Grandma, the doctor said you need to rest. I'm going to take care of you, just like you took care of me." Betty smiled weakly. "My dear, you can't take care of me. You're a child. Then who's going to take care of you?" It was Delilah who answered. "I will, Lily, and you're going to stay with me to help me." Lily looked at her mother uncertainly. Although the relationship between them was improving, they still hadn't spent an entire night together. Can I sleep at Delilah's house?" she asked Betty. "You can, and Uncle Richard will be nearby too in case you need anything." "Promise you'll get better soon, Grandma." "I promise, my little flower." That night, for the first time in 6 years, Lily slept away from the Blue House. The room that Delilah had rented was small but cozy. She had bought an extra bed especially for these moments. "Delilah," said Lily when they were getting ready to sleep, "can I tell you a secret?" "Sure." I'm a little afraid of the surgery. Delilah sat on the edge of the bed. What kind of fear? What if something goes wrong? What if I can't walk after? What if I pass away like my grandpa passed away? Delilah's heart clenched. Lily, look at me. Nothing is going to go wrong. Dr. Matthews is very competent, and you're a strong girl. But what if? There is no what if, Delilah interrupted gently. You know why I know everything is going to be okay? Why? Because you have a lot of people who love you and are rooting for you. Grandma Betty, me, Uncle Richard, so much love doesn't let anything bad happen. Lily thought about that. Do you really believe that? I believe it with all the strength of my heart. In the following days, mother and daughter developed a new routine. Delilah took Lily to visit Betty every morning. Then they spent the afternoon together, exploring the town, talking, getting to know each other. Delilah, Lily said during one of those afternoons, can I ask a question about my dad? Delilah tensed. It was a conversation that she knew would come, but for which she never felt prepared. You can. Was he a good person? He was, replied Delilah honestly. He worked at one of Uncle Richard's mills. He was kind, hard-working, always made people laugh. Lord, why did he leave? Delilah took a deep breath. Because he got scared when he found out you were going to be born. Some men get scared of the responsibility of being a father. Do you think he thinks about me sometimes? I think so. How could someone not think about a beautiful girl like you? Do you? Do you know where he is? The question that Delilah most feared had finally arrived. The truth was that she did know where Carlos was. She had found out a few months ago that he still lived in the neighboring town, married and with 2 children. But how to explain that to Lily? I do, she said finally. But Lily, sometimes it's better to leave the past in the past. Why? Because people change, they form new families, and sometimes when we look for answers from the past, we end up getting hurt. Lily was quiet for a long time. Do you think I should meet him? I think you should. Think carefully if that's really important to you, and if it is, when you're older we can talk about it again. Okay. But Delilah? Yes? Even if I met my dad, Uncle Richard would still be my uncle of the heart, right? Of course he would. No one can take that place from him. On the eve of the surgery, the whole family gathered at the Blue House. Betty was visibly better, but still weak. Richard had brought flowers to brighten the environment, and Delilah had prepared Lily's favorite food. Tomorrow is the big day, said Richard, sitting next to Lily on the small sofa. I'm nervous, she admitted. It's normal to be nervous. I'm nervous too. Are you? Very. But you know what makes me feel calmer? What? Knowing that after tomorrow, you'll be able to run, jump, play as you've always wanted. You'll be able to go to school without worrying about what the other kids are going to say. Uncle Rick, can I ask you something? Anything. No matter how my leg is after the surgery, are you going to keep loving me? Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. Lily, look at me. I love you for who you are on the inside, your courage, your joy, your kind heart. None of that is ever going to change. Even if I always limp, even if you were in a wheelchair forever, you would still be the most special girl in the world to me. Lily smiled and snuggled into his arm. Then I'm ready for the surgery. That night, while Lily slept, the 3 adults talked about the next day. They had fears, hopes, anxieties, but also an absolute certainty. No matter what happened, they would face it together. Richard, said Betty, I want to thank you for everything you've done for us. You brought hope back to our family. Mrs. Betty, you're the ones who brought life back to me. For years I was just existing. Now I know what it is to live again. And I, said Delilah, I learned what it means to be a real mother. It's not just giving birth, it's being present. It's choosing every day to love and protect. Tomorrow, said Richard. Our family will be complete in a way I never thought possible. From the room came Lily's sleepy voice. Good night, family. I love you. We love you too, the three responded in unison, knowing that whatever happened, the next day, the love that united them was indestructible. The day of the surgery dawned cloudy in Columbus, but Lily woke up with a smile on her face. She had slept surprisingly well in the hospital, perhaps because Richard had spent the night in a chair next to her bed, and Delilah on the sofa near the window. Good morning, family, she said, stretching. Today is the day of my new leg. Betty, who had insisted on coming despite her weakness, laughed at the way her granddaughter referred to the surgery. New leg. It's going to be the same leg, just fixed. Then it's a fixed leg, corrected Lily cheerfully, like when Uncle Richard fixed the faucet at home. The simple comparison made everyone smile, relieving some of the tension in the air. Dr. Matthews arrived around 8 in the morning for the final preparations. He explained the procedure to Lily once more, using simple terms that she could understand. Lily, you're going to fall into a very nice sleep, and when you wake up, your leg will be in a cast. After we take the cast off, you're going to do exercises to get strong again, and then I'll be able to run. You're going to be able to do many things that are difficult today. And will it hurt a lot? At first, it will be a little uncomfortable, but we have very good medicines for that, and your family will be here all the time to take care of you. When it was time to take Lily to the operating room, she asked to speak to each one individually. Grandma Betty, she said, holding her grandmother's hands, thank you for taking care of me since I was little. When I grow up, I'm going to take care of you. You already take care of me, my little flower. Just by existing, you already take care. Delilah, she turned to her mother, thank you for coming back. I like having a mom. I thank you for giving me a second chance, replied Delilah, kissing her daughter's forehead. And Uncle Rick, she saved Richard for last. Thank you for choosing me to be your daughter of the heart. Richard knelt next to the gurney. Lily, who chose whom? We both chose each other, she replied wisely. Exactly, and nothing is ever going to change that. Not even if I get famous after my leg gets better and forget about you. Richard laughed. Not even if you become the most famous person in the world. Not even if I become a doctor and get very smart and think you're silly. Not even then. Not even if... Lily, Dr. Matthews interrupted gently. It's time. Are you ready? She nodded bravely. I'm ready. The surgery lasted 3 hours. 3 hours that seemed like an eternity for the family waiting in the waiting room. Richard couldn't stand still, walking from one side to the other. Delilah tried to read a magazine, but read the same page over and over. Betty, despite her weakness, remained firm, whispering prayers. Richard, said Delilah at one point, can I tell you something? Sure. This morning, when I saw Lily being taken into surgery, I really understood what it is to be a mother. It's not just giving birth to a child. It's feeling that half of your heart is there on that gurney. That's exactly it, agreed Richard. And now I understand why my mother never fully recovered when Carmen passed away. Carmen was your daughter. Richard nodded. She was the same age as Lily. She died in a car accident that I caused. For 18 years I carried the guilt, thinking that I didn't deserve to be happy again. And now I know that Carmen wouldn't want me to waste the rest of my life suffering. She would want me to love another child, to be a better father than I managed to be for her. Betty, who was listening to the conversation, spoke up. Son, you didn't cause your daughter's passing on purpose. It was an accident, and you honor her memory by being a wonderful father to Lily. At 2:30 p.m., Dr. Matthews finally emerged from the operating room. His face was tired but satisfied. How is she? The three asked at the same time. The surgery was a complete success, he announced, and everyone felt as if they could breathe again. We managed to correct the bone alignment better than we expected. With proper physical therapy, Lily will have an excellent quality of life. When can we see her? Asked Delilah. She's still waking up from the anesthesia. In about an hour you can come in one at a time. Richard was the first to enter the room. He found Lily half asleep but conscious, with her right leg immobilized in a colorful cast that she had chosen, pink with gold stars. "Uncle Rick," she said in a hoarse voice, "is it over?" "It's over, my dear. Everything went well." "Is my leg fixed?" "It is. Dr. Matthews said it was better than he expected." Lily tried to move and grimaced. "It hurts a little. The nurse is going to give you medicine for the pain to go away. But Lily, you were very brave." "I dreamed about you," she said, smiling weakly. "I dreamed that you were holding my hand during the surgery." "I was holding your hand in my heart," replied Richard, moved. In the following days, Lily's recovery was surprisingly rapid. Her natural energy and optimism helped her deal with the initial discomfort. More importantly, seeing how the whole family mobilized to take care of her brought an emotional security that accelerated her healing. Delilah had taken a leave of absence from work and didn't leave her daughter's side. Richard had reorganized his entire schedule to be present at every doctor's appointment. Betty, even still recovering, made a point of staying at the hospital as much as possible. "You know what's coolest about having a leg in a cast?" asked Lily on the third day. "What?" asked Delilah. "That everyone wants to sign it. I already have the signature of Nurse Rose, Dr. Matthews, and even the cleaning guy." "And what are you going to do when you take the cast off?" asked Richard. "I'm going to keep it forever. It's going to be a reminder of when my whole family helped me get better." A week after the surgery, Dr. Matthews brought even better news during a routine examination. "The consolidation is happening faster than normal," he said. "If it continues like this, we'll be able to take the cast off in 5 weeks, not 8 as planned." "Does that mean it's healing well?" asked Betty. "It means it's healing perfectly. And Lily, you can already start some light exercises to keep the muscles active." That afternoon, while Lily was doing the exercises prescribed by the physical therapist, something happened that completely changed everyone's mood. She managed to move her right toes much more easily than before the surgery. "Look!" she shouted, excited. "I can move my little toes without pain." Dr. Matthews, who was monitoring the exercise, smiled. "That's an excellent sign. The surgery released the pressure on the nerves. You're going to have a lot more mobility than you had before." "A lot more like?" asked Lily. "Like running, jumping, riding a bike, things that were difficult before." "Ride a bike." Lily's eyes widened. "I've always wanted to ride a bike." "Then," said Richard, "I think I already know what your gift is going to be when they take the cast off." At that moment, looking at Lily radiant with joy, surrounded by 3 adults who loved her unconditionally, Richard realized that his family was complete. Not in the traditional way he had always imagined, but in a much more beautiful way, united by choice, by true love, and by the determination not to give up on each other. The girl he had seen being humiliated on the street months ago, who limped painfully with a makeshift crutch, was now on her way to a completely new life, and he, the man who had spent 18 years blaming himself for the loss of his daughter, had finally found a way to honor Carmen's memory, being the father that a special child deserved to have. 6 months after the surgery, Harmony Creek woke up to another sunny day, but at the Blue House, now renovated and expanded with a new porch that Richard had built, the family was preparing for a very special celebration. It was Lily's 7th birthday, but more than that. It was the day she would finally take her first steps completely free, without crutches, without limitations, without pain. "Uncle Rick!" she shouted from the window of the new room they had built for her. "The pink bike looks so pretty in the yard." Richard smiled. arranging the final details of the party in the garden. The pink bike with training wheels that could be gradually removed was parked under the tree with a giant gold bow. "Be careful not to fall out the window, Shorty," he shouted back. "I'm not going to fall. Now I have balance." And it was true. The months of physical therapy had transformed Lily completely. She not only walked normally, but ran, jumped, and danced with a contagious joy. More importantly, she had lost that constant caution that had accompanied her for years, that fear of hurting herself or bothering others. "Delilah," called Betty from the kitchen where she was preparing the birthday cake, "can you see if she's getting dressed properly? The guests are going to arrive soon." Delilah, who now lived in a small house 3 blocks away, close enough to always be present, far enough to respect Betty's space, went up to help her daughter. "Mom," said Lily, using for the first time the word that she had resisted for so long, "do you think I look pretty?" Delilah felt her heart clench with emotion. It had only been 2 weeks since Lily had started calling her mom, and each time it was still a wonderful surprise. "You're the most beautiful girl in Harmony Creek," she replied, adjusting the new yellow dress they had bought especially for the occasion. "And the happiest, too?" "Definitely the happiest." The guests began to arrive around 3 in the afternoon. In addition to the family, there were some children from the new school where Lily had started studying 3 months ago, Dr. Matthews and his wife, who had become close friends, and to everyone's surprise, Dr. Anderson and Martha, who brought generous gifts. But the biggest surprise came when the party was already lively. A tall, dark-haired man around 40 years old appeared at the gate holding a gift and with a nervous expression on his face. Delilah saw him first and turned pale. "Carlos," she murmured. Richard, who was nearby, heard the name and immediately understood who it was. Lily's biological father had appeared. "What's he doing here?" asked Richard, instinctively protective. I told him about the surgery, about how Lily was doing well," admitted Delilah. "I told him where we lived, but I didn't expect him to come." Betty, always observant, noticed the tension and approached. "Who's that man?" "It's Carlos, Lily's father." A heavy silence settled among the 3 as they watched the man hesitate at the gate. At that moment, Lily, who was playing with other children, noticed the adult's attention. "Who's that man?" she asked, approaching. Before anyone could answer, Carlos mustered the courage and entered the yard. He walked directly to where Lily was, who watched him with curiosity. "Hi," he said, clearly nervous. "Are you Lily?" "I am. And you are?" Carlos looked at Delilah as if asking for permission. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "I'm Carlos. I knew your mother a long time ago, and I'm your father." The entire party seemed to stop. The children continued playing, oblivious to the drama that unfolded, but all the adults watched the scene with attention. Lily studied him for a long moment. "My blood father?" "That's right." "And why didn't you ever come to see me before?" The direct question, made with the brutal innocence of children, made Carlos swallow hard. "Because I was too young and I was scared. It was a very big mistake." "And now you're not scared anymore?" "Now I'm afraid of something different." "Of what?" "That you don't want to meet me." Lily looked at Richard, who had approached and was by her side. "Uncle Rick, what do you think?" Richard took a deep breath. His first reaction had been protection, almost jealousy. But looking at Carlos, he saw a genuinely repentant man who had mustered the courage to face a mistake from 7 years ago. "I think that decision is yours, Lily," he said. "But remember, meeting someone doesn't mean you have to like or forgive them. It just means meeting." Lily thought for a moment, then looked at Carlos again. "Do you want to stay for my party?" "If you let me. You can stay, but there's one thing you need to know." "What is it?" "I already have a father. Uncle Richard is my father of the heart, and he's not going to stop being because of you." Carlos looked at Richard with a mixture of gratitude and respect. I understand, and I'm glad that you found someone. So good to take care of you. Do you have other children? Asked Lily. I do, 2 boys. Do they know I exist? Carlos hesitated. They do, and they would very much like to meet their sister. Can I think about that? Of course. You can take all the time you want. The party continued, but with a different dynamic. Carlos stayed, in a respectful position, talking mostly with Delilah and watching Lily from afar. It was obvious that he was impressed with the intelligent and confident girl that his daughter had become. When it was time for Lily to try out the new bike, the whole party gathered in the yard to watch. Richard held the bike while she got on. Are you scared? He asked. A little. What if I fall? Then you get up and try again, like you always have. And you're going to let go? Only when you're ready. Lily pedaled a few feet with Richard holding on, then looked back. You can let go, Dad. It was the first time she had called him Dad, and Richard felt like his heart was going to explode. With emotion, he let go of the bike and watched his daughter of the heart pedal alone through the yard, laughing with pure joy. Look, I'm riding a bike, I'm flying! While everyone applauded and shouted with joy, Carlos approached Richard. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For being the father that I didn't have the courage to be. For having given her everything she deserved. Carlos, said Richard, Lily has room in her heart for a lot of people. If you want to be part of her life in a respectful way, without pressuring, I'm not going to stop you. And you? I'm always going to be her father. Nothing else matters anymore. That night, after the guests had left and Carlos had departed with the promise of returning next weekend for a longer conversation, the family gathered on the new porch. What a day, sighed Betty, watching Lily play with the orange kitten, now big and fat. Grandma, said Lily, approaching, can I tell you something? Of course, my little flower. Today, I understood that we can have many people who love us, and that doesn't make the love divide, it makes the love multiply. Who taught you that pretty word? Asked Delilah. The teacher at school. She said that multiplying is when one becomes many. And it's true, said Richard, pulling her onto his lap. When I met you, my heart was empty. Now it's so full of love that it doesn't even fit. And it's going to stay full forever? Forever and a day. Lily snuggled into his lap, watching the stars that were beginning to appear in the sky of Harmony Creek. Dad, she said, thank you for choosing me that day on the street. Thank you for letting me choose you, replied Richard. While the family enjoyed the tranquility of the night, a soft breeze swayed the flowers in the garden that Delilah had planted. In the kitchen, the birthday cake still had a few slices, and in the yard, the pink bike shone under the moonlight. 6 months ago, Lily was a girl who limped through the streets begging, suffering from the cruelty of men like Walter Thompson. Today, she was a loved, cared-for child, with a bright future ahead and a family that had formed not by blood ties, but by the infinitely stronger ties of true love. Richard looked at Betty, who had fallen asleep in the rocking chair, at Delilah, who watched her daughter with finally realized maternal pride, and at Lily, who dozed in his arms after a day full of joy. He had lost a daughter 18 years ago and thought he would never be able to love like that again. But life had given him a second chance in the form of a brave girl who needed a father. And he had discovered that the human heart has an infinite capacity to start over, to heal, to love. The Blue House, now renovated and full of life, housed a family that proved every day that true love knows no conventions, only choices. And they had chosen to stay together forever.